What's the best ultra portable laptop on the market? Well, I can't answer that for you here, but what I can do is tell you which is the best of these three, so let's get into it. Yo, what up YouTube? Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to check out this video. I do hope that you find it useful, and if you do find it useful, entertaining, or you just simply have pity on me, consider dropping a like, maybe subscribing if you haven't already, and leave a comment, especially if you have experience with any of these laptops. I'd love to hear from you guys down in the comments. So today we're going to be taking a look at the 13-inch M2 MacBook Air, the HP Dragonfly Pro, and then the Dell XPS 13 Plus. And the reason why these are the three that we're choosing from is because I think they cover a wide swath of the ultra portable market out there. You know, we have the M2 Apple Silicon in the MacBook Air. We've got Ryzen 7000 in the Dragonfly Pro, and we have 13th gen Intel in the XPS Plus. So you could choose from a lot of different laptops, but I think this covers a wide gambit of the laptops that are out there, and these are three, I think, pretty in-demand products. So that's what we wanted to look at today. So what we're going to do is kind of look at the build of each. We'll take a look at the specs each of these laptops have, and then we'll kind of, as I'm talking about this stuff, I'll have the benchmarks just scrolling through because I tend to ramble and I don't want to keep you here all day. And then after that, we'll go through the pros and the cons of each laptop, and then ultimately, which one I think you should go with if you are looking at these kind of laptops here. So let's go ahead and start with the least notable of the three, and that would be the HP Dragonfly Pro. All right, so with the HP Dragonfly Pro here, it's a 14-inch laptop. It weighs in at 3.42 pounds. It does have the Ryzen 7000. It's the 7736U, which is an 8-core, 16-thread Zen 3 Plus. So it's not Zen 4, the Ryzen naming convention. Who knows? They were drinking. But this is Zen 3 Plus. This model also comes with 32 gigabits of DDR5 RAM, 1 terabyte Gen 4 NVMe SSD, and it has a 65 watt-hour battery. So I'm not going to include battery test in the benchmark, so I'll just get it out here as we're looking at each laptop. I did a 6.5-hour YouTube playback, so set the brightness to 50%, ran it for 6.5 hours, and just see where the battery is. After the 6.5-hour test, this had 48% battery life left, so that's pretty good for a Windows laptop. And some of the other specs here, it's a 14-inch IPS panel, a 1900 by 1200, so it's that 16 by 10 aspect ratio. As far as accuracy goes, it's 100% sRGB, 82% Adobe RGB, and 83% DCI-P3. It claims to have 500 nits of brightness. It's a 60 hertz refresh rate panel, but it is touchscreen. There you go, it's touchscreen. So that's the specs of the HP Dragonfly Pro. So overall, just a nice simple layout, with the keyboard, trackpad is centered, which is very nice. It's that Starlight Black, I think is what they call it. Don't quote me on that, I could be mistaken, but that's what I believe it is. So up next, let's take a look at the Dell XPS. All right, so with the XPS 13 Plus here, this is a 13.4-inch laptop weighing in at 2.7 pounds. It comes with, like I mentioned, the 13th gen Intel. It's the i7 1360P, which is a 12-core, 16-thread CPU. It has those 4 performance cores with the 8 efficiency cores. This model also comes with 32 gigabits of RAM, DDR5, a 1 terabyte Gen 4 SSD, and this has a 55 watt-hour battery. So in that same 6.5-hour YouTube playback test, 50% brightness, this ended, and for all of them, I started them, of course, at 100% battery. This ended with 9% battery life. So the Dragonfly Pro had 48% battery life. This had 9% battery life at the end of the 6.5-hour test. And then just for the rest of the specs here, again, 13.4-inch IPS panel. This is the full HD model, so it's 1920 by 1200. Again, also that 16 by 10 aspect ratio. As far as color accuracy, 100% sRGB, 96% Adobe RGB, and 98% DCI-P3. It also claims 500 nits of brightness with a 60 hertz refresh rate panel. And then just as far as, the look of it, obviously a very unique looking laptop with the sort of edge-to-edge keyboard design here, the, non-existent trackpad, very unique looking, and then the capacitive touch, I think is what they call it, function row, very unique looking laptop. So let's go and look at the last one here, the MacBook Air, and then we'll get into the pros and cons. All right, and then lastly here we have the 13-inch M2 MacBook Air, and this is a 13.6-inch laptop weighing in at 2.7 pounds. And for the GPU in this one, it has the 8-core CPU with the 10-core GPU. It includes 16 gigabits of the unified memory or RAM, and this also has the 1 terabyte SSD in it. This laptop has a 52.6 watt-hour battery, and with that same 6.5-hour YouTube playback test, this thing had a insane 77% battery life left. So 6.5 hours drained 23%. So public math is not a strength, but I believe that puts it at roughly around 26 hours of YouTube playback, which far outpaces even what they claim on their website of 18 hours. Again, just one test, but that's what I got. Nuts battery life. It's an IPS, LED backlit display. It's a slightly better than 2K resolution screen. It's that weird Apple resolution. It's 2560 by 1664. Also 16 by 10 aspect ratio. And then as far as color accuracy, 100% sRGB, 88% Adobe RGB, and 99% DCI-P3. This one also claims 500 nits of brightness, and it's a 60 hertz refresh rate panel. So that's the specs of the laptops. Let's get into the pros and cons of each. Now, before we get into the pros and cons, I just forgot to mention, so as far as ports on these things, they're basically just USB-C Thunderbolt connectors. So 2 Thunderbolt ports on the XPS, 2 Thunderbolt and 1 USB-C on the HP Dragonfly, and 2 Thunderbolt 4 on the MacBook. And webcams, we'll get that out of the way here as well. So the XPS has a 720p webcam, 1080p on the MacBook, 1440p on the Dragonfly Pro. You're gonna have to let me know which one you think is actually the best. But that is the specs of the laptop. So let's go through the pros. So we'll start with the XPS here. And the pros of this one is it's just the best looking of the three, in my opinion. Now that's obviously subjective, but this is a very unique looking laptop. And, when you are using it out in public, people that see it, they're probably going to take notice of how this thing looks. It's very unique. It's small, it's sleek, the screen is great. The keyboard, touchpad are obviously very unique looking. So that's awesome. It's going to turn heads. But the other pro on this is the keyboard. I think this is personally the best keyboard of the 3 laptops. It'll take some getting used to because of the layout of the actual deck itself, but the keys feel great to type on. They have like a kind of a deep press with like a nice, kind of snap or actuation on the bottom, which just feels really good to use. So it's a very nice keyboard. And the last thing that I like about this laptop that makes it a pro is it's upgradable. Not a lot, but you can upgrade the SSD, which is nice. I believe you can put up to a 2 terabyte SSD in here. So, for something this thin, this light, to be able to actually allow you any upgrade at all is a benefit. Now to the cons. This is kind of a sad con here, but the first and most notable con here is the Intel chip. The fact that this is using Intel, and I say sad because boy, it wasn't many years ago when Intel was king of the hill, right? If you were going to be making a nice high-end PC, you almost had to go Intel. But things have changed now, and that's just not the case. So having Intel in a laptop this thin and light is not great. I mean, talked about the battery test earlier, 6.5 hour YouTube playback test, and this thing was almost dead compared to the other laptops that had plenty of battery left to go. And the other negative here is the capacitive touch keypad or function row. I'm not a big fan of it. I think it is it's a cool idea, and I get why they did it. It's just not very nice to use. It's very sensitive, so if you actually get your fingers near it, it tends to actuate whatever key it's supposed to be under there, and just doesn't feel that nice to use. Again, I get it for heat management and this sort of stuff, but it would have been nice to have actual keys there. So that's the pros, that's the cons. Let's take a look at the Dragonfly next. All right, so the next one here that we have is the Dragonfly Pro. So let's look at the pros of the Pro. And the first one would be the touch screen. If you're somebody that needs a touch screen on your laptop, then that's nice, right? You could benefit from that. So, if you need a touch screen, this is the one for you. Also, I think the battery life is exceptional on this laptop. Again, you're getting 14 hours, roughly 13 to 14 hours of video playback on this. For a Windows laptop, 14 inches, that's pretty good. I mean, you can't really ask for much more than that. And then I think the last pro on this is that with that Ryzen 7000 CPU, you're also getting the Radeon 680M, which I think is RDNA 2, but that 680M iGPU. So while not a gaming computer, you can certainly do some gaming with this laptop. If you're talking about maybe older AAA titles or maybe esports titles, you can do some legitimate gaming on this laptop with that GPU. So that's a definite plus. And then for the cons on this thing, being an ultra portable, it is not quite as thin and quite as light as some of the other laptops. So, the XPS and the MacBook are 2.7 pounds. This is 3.4, and it's noticeably heavier, especially when you're, comparing it to the XPS 13, noticeably heavier. So the other one, I was not a big fan of the keyboard on this, which is a shame because normally keyboards are one of HP's strengths, but the keys on these or on this laptop, they're shallow, they actuate quickly, but they sort of feel mushy to me. I don't know how to explain it. Whereas, the MacBook keyboard is shallow, but it's, that clicky, very tactile to the touch. This one is a bit mushy for me. I still think you could type fast on it and type well. I just don't like the way it feels. So that's a con. And then the last negative here, or con, if you will, is that nothing's upgradable. What you get is what you get. And you get a lot. 32 gigs of RAM and a 1 terabyte SSD is plenty, but you can't upgrade it. So, that's a negative because the XPS you can. So it would have been nice if maybe you could at least have an SSD upgrade in there. But again, they fit a big old vapor chamber cooler and a big battery in this thing. So that takes up a lot of space. But lastly, let's go ahead and take a look at the MacBook Air. Actually, I forgot to mention one last con that I had here on the HP Dragonfly Pro. And, whereas the touchscreen was a pro for this laptop, it not being quite as color accurate as the others is a negative. Now, it's plenty color accurate to do work on, but again, the other ones are far more color accurate. So maybe that's the trade-off they made, touchscreen for color accuracy. And if you need touchscreen more than a color accurate monitor, then it makes no difference to you. But again, if we're just talking about cons, a less color accurate monitor would be a con in this comparison. All right, now to the MacBook. All right, so discussing the pros of the MacBook. First off, battery life. As I mentioned, this is bonkers. The battery life in this thing, which, and supposedly this is like the worst battery of the bunch of, M1, M2 MacBooks. So I couldn't imagine what a 16-inch, MacBook battery life is like. You could essentially put this laptop on watching a movie or YouTube videos at 10 o'clock at night, fall asleep watching it, wake up the next day, go about your whole day, come back to bed at 10 o'clock at night, and just still keep watching YouTube and fall asleep again without ever charging it. The battery's insane. So that's a huge pro. The second one would be the CPU, that M2 chip in here. Very powerful considering the limited amount of power that it actually utilizes. You could very easily do some, real content creation on this laptop. It's pretty incredible what they're capable of doing, and even when it comes to video editing and stuff, this does have the media engines in it. So you can do legitimate video editing, photo editing, or editing and that sort of stuff on this laptop. So that's great. Now for cons, and yes, Apple does have cons. And the first one, while they may not be many, but the first one is real. And that first one would be that it's pricey. You can't get around that with Apple products. The Apple tax is real, and you're going to pay a premium for this laptop. Now, I forgot to mention this earlier, but I picked all of these laptops up refurbished. So when I got them, they were all relatively the same price. So I'll leave links to the Apple refurbished. Best Buy, I bought the Dragonfly Pro at Best Buy open box, and I got the XPS 13 at the Dell outlet. And I highly recommend you look there, especially with Apple products, because the cool thing about Apple is, if you're a student, you're military, or maybe first responder or whatever, you can get that initial discount and take that to the refurbished store as well. So now you can get a discount on top of a discount, which is what I did for this laptop, and save a bunch of money. So that is a con, right? It costs more than the other options. The second one is, like the Dragonfly, it's non-upgradable. So that is a con. Obviously it's Apple, nothing's ever upgradable, but it not being upgradable stinks because you do have stuff, things like the XPS 13 that are. So that's the cons with the MacBook. So now let's go back and talk about which one I think you should choose. And I think between these three laptops, if this is what you're looking for, I think the winner here, I would have to say the M2 MacBook Air. And that may seem obvious, maybe a bit underwhelming, but if you're going for productivity, school, a business laptop, whatever happens to be, it's hard to beat the all-around, power, the portability, and the performance that this laptop offers. It's pretty crazy what they're able to do with a laptop this thin and this light. But I'll say this is the winner with one caveat, and that's that you like Mac OS. If you don't like Mac OS, or maybe you just have to have Windows, well then, it's not a winner for you. But if you're all right with either operating system, you just want the best machine, the M2 Air, I think, is a clear winner here. And I will just mention that the Dragonfly Pro or the XPS, I think, could have won this competition if they would have just exchanged some parts. If the XPS would have just used Ryzen 7000, I think it would have been the winner. And I think maybe if the HP Dragonfly just allowed like SSD upgrades, then I think it might have been the winner. But because they both had those limitations there, and the MacBook Air is just such a great machine all around, I just think this one is a clear winner. Now, which one of these am I picking? Because that's ultimately why I bought these, was for classes that I'm getting ready to take. So the one that I'm choosing out of these is none of them. If you want to know what laptop I am going to choose, you got to stick around to the next video. That's a little bit of the old YouTube incentive to stick around. So I will get into the next video what laptop I chose instead of these three. But all of these are great at the end of the day. Whichever one you choose, they're awesome. They're great productivity, you know, thin and light. They're a joy to use. You can't really go wrong. It's just, boy, the Mac offers a lot. So I hope you guys found this video useful. If you did, again, consider liking, subscribing if you haven't, and then let me know in the comments if you think I'm right, wrong, what I got right, what I got wrong, and what are some better options than these three on the table here. But otherwise, that's all I got. God bless.